Hi, welcome to Discover Tuesdays Creators Corner. I am Jeannie. I'm here with Daniel Giamario. He is an author, researcher, and astrologer. Thank you for being here with us, Daniel.
Pleasure being with you, Jeannie. Looking forward to talking with you.
Yes, I want to just share a little bit about yourself. You bear with me because this is a little. Actually, I'm not gonna because I actually lost where I put that. But tell us a little bit. We'll just jump in because I misplaced where I put, what I was gonna say about just a little bit about you. You being a researcher and astrologer, you founding a school. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and everybody bear with us. This is the first time I do this without Jared. And before I get started, Daniel, happy birthday to you too. Thank you for being here with us on your birthday.
Well, my pleasure. I'm glad it worked out today. We're
Oh,
heading out tomorrow for the solar eclipse. So we have our school has a whole gathering out in New Mexico for the eclipse that's happening across the U.S. And I might mention something about that later. So you want me to go back to the beginning and tell you a little bit that was on
yes.
that
Tell
bio?
me who
Okay.
Daniel is and how you got started and how you ended up here.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I'm a late 60s guy. I was born in 1948, and I was fortunate to be in a university from 1966 to 1970. Before that was the time period, actually, Jeannie, where we had the success at getting the military, getting corporations and fraternities and sororities off of campus. So we were actually in a very free kind of zone at that particular time period. And I was a philosophy and East Asian studies major. And it was in 1969 I became aware of the type of astrology that I'm into at this point. It started at that point, and that is from the work of Dane Rudhyar. And so for many years through the 70s, I was really part of that approach. It was called transpersonal astrology, and it was actually sort of merging together Jungian theosophical kinds of things. It was Aurobindo. A lot of different streams were brought together by that man's work, as well as he was pretty much a cultural creative revolutionary at that particular point. So a lot of the young astrologers at that point were really following him a lot. But then I also spent some years as a meditation teacher. I was involved in actually one of them, which was ended up being quite a cult, and I went through a certain kind of cult deprogramming through that particular organization. Thank God I got out of that. But then in 1981, I went to Mount Shasta with a woman named Joan Halifax, part of something called the Ojai Foundation, and had a Vision Quest experience at Mount Shasta, and that entirely changed my entire approach. And at that point, I decided if I was going to continue to be an astrologer, that I was going to learn the land and the sky. So I took lots of people to sacred sites. Developed an approach to astrology that came directly from the experience with the night sky, and then very much was not following traditional astrology at all. So I'm certainly not involved in the type of astrology that is sun sign astrology. And then through the 80s, created an organization called the Harbingers of the Turning of the Ages. And during those years, some of us, not too many, became aware of this phenomena that is happening at this time period we're in now, which is the convergence of different timelines, where basically we're not just in any time period in history, but rather it's the end of Kali Yuga, it's the end and the beginning of a processional cycle, the sixth sun, the way the Toltecs talk about it, and also the sixth mass extinction, and also I put a lot of attention on what's called the fourth turning, which is not astrology at all, but it's just looking at European and American history based on cycles. So all those things started being woven together, and then after 2000, the school became the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and then last year it morphed into a third wave, which is now just directly called the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. And we're more than just astrology. I mean, we involve ourselves in spirituality and cosmology and ceremony. And we have different branches in the school that covers, psychological applications, spiritual applications, as well as like going to a variety of different sacred sites. Like we actually have a group formed to go to Callanish in the Outer Hebrides for what's called the lunar standstill. So there's all these different sort of cosmological land-based events that we spend a lot of time with, including this thing we're doing on October 14th with the eclipse that's going across New Mexico.
Wow. And how did you know for you that you didn't want to study, or you didn't want to do or were you just, was it in your charts not to do traditional astrology, or what I guess trendy, or what's mainstream astrology now?
Well, because all during the 1970s, I discovered that when people were boxed into sun signs, that a great majority of the people weren't like that.
Okay.
So then I began to see that that was very superficial. In fact, I even went into the background and research on it, and so I use other parts of the chart to come up with the things that are more useful.
Let's pause, because maybe a lot of people watching this know regular, or just know the basics of astrology. They know a sun sign, they know, moon sign. What are the basics? If people didn't really know anything about astrology, what are the basics, and what is the difference between what you do and what everybody sees every day when they say, like, what's your sun sign? What's your moon sign? What's this sign? Tell me about that.
Well, so the approach we have is, I'll use the word developmental. So there's a portion of the chart that will give a sense of who you were coming into the life. So our view is that when you're born, you're not a blank slate. But so there'll be essential qualities like you have a Pisces moon, as far as I can tell, when you get from the data you shared with me. I'm a Capricorn moon. So when you know a person's moon position, you could say, you used to be a Capricorn, or you previously graduated from the University of Capricorn. So that's the only part of the chart that is your original essence. But then it's mainly the Venus or the Mars position on the chart that will show what expression of the masculine or the feminine you came into the life to investigate. Like in your case, you have Venus in Sagittarius. I have Mars in Scorpio. And actually the founder of, I think I have this right, I believe that a lot of people, like, for example, RFK Jr. is Mars and Scorpio. Sergi, I believe, is Mars and Scorpio. So see, there's different expressions of what version of the masculine you came in to investigate. With you, Venus and Sagittarius. Now, sometimes Venus will be the same sign as the sun sign, but for women, that's only 2/5 of the time. So it's usually the Venus position more than anything that will show what you're here to investigate. And then if you have a birth time available, you will know what your rising sign is. And the ascendant is more like the helm of the ship. The directional flow of the soul is moving in that direction. So it's more associated with life purpose themes.
So I've looked up, I've looked up mine, and the time frame I told you, in that whole time frame, it's Pisces as well, right? I mean, I could be wrong. You could look it up another time. I don't think I am, but it's Pisces.
What do you mean? You mean the rising sign?
Yeah. Could be wrong.
I mean, I could not tell just by the day. I didn't calculate it, but I'm pretty sure based on what you shared with me that your moon is in Pisces. So that means you used to be Pisces, but now you have Venus in Sagittarius, and that's a different expression of the feminine. That's what we call the version of the goddess, of the sacred feminine. That's the adventurer, the explorer, the individual who wants to go where someone has never gone before. So Jung called it more the Amazonian expression of the feminine, a woman whose identity is based upon her accomplishments, her achievements, and her freedom, and her quest for meaning and purpose and the love of truth. That's a very different thing than Pisces. But I don't know what your rising sign is. I mean, that's based upon the birth time. It changes every 2 hours. So you can get some very, very specific information about life purpose. And we were talking about this before we started this, the official interview here, that you were saying, well, why do I even want to do astrology? What's the purpose of it? It's mainly to assist an individual in aligning with their life purpose, because if you know what your life purpose is, on a certain level, if you know your place on the wheel of life, if you know what you were born to do, in some ways it doesn't even matter what happens out there. I mean, if God said there will be no land to plant on in 6 months, and if you're a farmer, you still plant your crop,
Right.
or if your dharma is to be a mother, even though many people today might think, well, this is a horrendous time to bring a child into the world. Nevertheless, if your dharma is to be a mother, you have children. I
Yeah.
mean, so it's to know what your purpose is all important right now.
And actually, just to speak a little bit about what you said, I don't think I said what's the purpose. I think what I said was, which I do want you to elaborate on this because the answer you gave me was I loved it. I think what I said was, if somebody were to, do you think with astrology, does that basically give you a chart of what you're supposed to do? And you said that that gives you basically like an outline of how to, right? That's kind of what you said. You didn't use those
Mhm.
words. That's kind of like somebody looked at astrology, like, how is astrology supposed to help me?
So it's a set of instructions.
Hmm. And what
But
happens
but
when people don't familiarize themselves with astrology or what they're doing? Do you think they have a harder time in this life, or?
Oh no, I mean there's other ways to get that information. I mean, I'm not trying to in any way say astrology is the only
Right.
way or something like that. Not at all. But you're bringing up something quite interesting, because the core of our whole mystery school approach is the sovereignty of the individual. All the great spiritual teachers, whether it's Steiner or Aurobindo, you can just go down the list, Jung, that you cannot evolve through the collective. Basically, the individual, the sovereign individual is who has the free will to choose to do what they're born to do or not. There's something in the Christian Bible that says many are called and few are chosen. Well, I rewrote that for the purpose of our school, which is many are called, but only some agree. So for example, when Jung was asked what is free will said means, it was a very beautiful answer. He said, free will means to gladly do what you must do. So if you become aware of what your instructions are, then you agree to do that, but then a human being can choose not to.
Right.
And millions choose not to. I mean, I think it was it might have been Camus who said at one point that human beings are the one species on the planet who can choose to not be themselves. That
Very,
you can go against your basic nature.
yeah. Well, I don't think that can be fulfilling. Let's talk about your school. So you created the school. If somebody's like, I want to just, how does that layout work? Is it a certain amount of time? Is it just kind of they're part of the school? Tell me about your school.
Well, I mean, there are people who are members. We have a membership, and we're supported by our membership. And then if a person desires to be an astrologer, I mean, a lot of people in the school are not on a track to become astrologers, because there's so many things our school offers that are not that. But we do have a very well set up certification program based on five courses, and we have them online. We do them in person, and it's just a series of courses that a person takes. And we have mentors and an extensive mentorship program. And you can take them online. You can take them in person. It's all laid out pretty well, I think, on our website. And so a person can become a certain level. You can there's a level of it that is just knowing how to read a chart, And then there's a level of it which is fully initiated, including, having experiences with the land and the sky. And as in a mystery school these days doesn't mean it's secret. It means
Right,
that you go through a program, a training,
right.
including initiations. There's a series of practices that a person chooses to do in order to qualify themselves for doing this kind of astrology.
And is it self-paced, the course?
What do you mean self-paid?
Like it's self-paced. Like do they do the courses
Oh,
on
oh,
their
oh, yeah, yeah. A variety of ways. There are people who take it under their own. They can take a series of years to go through it. There are people who do it on a fast track. We also, on the courses that we have online, we have what are called group guided sessions. Where basically 10 people, 15 people who are taking the course will meet with one of the mentors. Like I'm doing one now with our third course. And then we meet over the course of every other week for about 5 sessions as the person goes through it. And then we do have an examination. It's actually more of a study guide, but it's not like this is a test. But
right.
we definitely want to make sure that an individual is qualified if they're going to be certified to do this type of astrology. So yeah, we have a full certification program there. But a person can. I mean, we have like oh my goodness, hundreds of different resources out on our website, free, mostly all free. Seminars, we do like 1 to 8, 12, 15 different seminars a year.
Oh wow.
Um, uh, and and then I do a monthly vlogcast. I write articles every month. I do weekly media posts. All of that stuff can be found on under the Founders Corner on our website. So there's just really a large amount of resources there.
Yeah.
But I also want to emphasize it's more than just astrology. So we teach people about how to do the ceremony on the land, what sacred sites to go to, um, uh, and basic night sky training, cosmology training, uh, and also deep dives into the spiritual foundations of this work, which is at this stage of the game includes a lot of stuff with Steiner, Rudhyar, Jung, archetypal psychologists, uh, archaeoastronomers. Basically all that. If you ever go to our website, every one of the branches of the school, you'll see like a really extensive resource section, of videos and book lists, recommended reading and things like that.
And now that well, that's a lot of information. I don't think from just thinking, I'm glad that you said it because I don't think I would have picked that up. That's a lot of information, a lot of resources that people get with, this certification or wanting to learn more about it. So I'm glad that you said that because that's
Or even without signing up for certification, all that stuff is
right. It's
available.
just
I
on your
mean,
website. Yeah, I didn't know, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And with having your own website and you have these resources and stuff like that, and you already basically have like a space where you do your stuff. Thank you so
yes.
much for being on Unite. What made you come to Unite and also want to make Unite a second, another home to be able to put your stuff? Because you post blogs on there often. You have a regular podcast with your podcast host Naraya. What Thank you for being on Unite, but why Unite?
Well, I was mentioning to you before we went on air here that I was 14 years old when JFK was killed. And I was from a military family. My dad was a colonel in the Army. And early on, I became aware the space program was a cover for military. And I certainly was aware of the deep state was involved with the killing of the three kings. And I even convinced my dad to leave the military when he became aware that what was that. Huh?
You were 14 and you convinced
Pardon?
your dad to leave the military?
No, no, that was not at 14, but about nine. He was running the Vietnam War in 1969 out of Hawaii. He had he was in Hawaii when I was in the University of Kansas completing my college education, and he was about to be made a general to go running the war out of Vietnam. But I was sending him all this stuff, about what was really happening with the Vietnam War and all this. And he finally said, I know you're right. This is all corrupt and the whole thing. And so he actually ended up retiring at that point. And he was actually quite an awake guy. I was really thankful to have a father who was aware of that and was very supportive of my path all the way through. Anyway, I've researched the deep state stuff, ever since the Fletcher Prouty's book called The Secret Team, So I've been following this up for a long, long time. And then along comes 2019 and early 2020, and those events that were happening, the COVID con, so at that time period, it became aware of the fact that I had to be very careful what I was going to be saying. I I was certainly aware of the Dirty Dozen, and most of those are the people that I was following, and so I got to be careful. So I had to learn how to present the astrology and my updates on the world situation in such a way to not get censored, and I was just really tired of doing that. And so I was looking for a way to be able to not be censored and just be able to share what I absolutely know is taking place on the planet without fear of censorship. So I was looking around for different platforms. Actually, in all honesty, what made me certain that it would be Unite is that I had written to Sergi, and I forget, I might have emailed him or something, and he said, "Oh, Daniel, yes, I know you love Rudhyar. I love Dane Rudhyar, and that's when I realized that this guy was somewhat aware of what I'm into." And so then I was looking at other platforms that turned out to be partisan, and this one is not partisan. It's not like red or blue or everything is channeled into, well, but still Trump is a good guy or whatever it might be. And the whole Biden and the whole sellout of the left is because I used to be a liberal leftist back in the day, and the whole transformation of that into fascism is just it's just been amazing to me to see it, to how it's turned out. I mean, I'm sort of like in the Naomi Wolf camp regarding that, But anyway, so I wanted a place that I could just go for it, and we're doing that on our podcast. And Naraya is a wonderful partner to do it with because while she's not exactly my generation, but she years ago became aware of the same things about what was happening in the world. And so we very much share the same views. And whenever we talk about stuff, she'll say something and then it sparks something in me and vice versa. And, it makes for a really good team in order to present. So, because what I do in the podcast is not just all astrology, but I try to frame it by talking about real astrology and what it is. And I've had, to be very honest with you, Jeannie, having been part of that wave of astrologers that followed Rudhyar in the 1970s, they did the first and important work on attacking the patriarchy of regular astrology. That it's just stunning to me how so much of the mainstream astrology world today has regressed. It's regressed. And in fact, I don't get invited. I mean, but many of the conferences, you got to be injected to go to the conferences, and you even have some of these well-known astrologers, even from my own generation, that are still put across their picture online. I got my COVID vaccine, play your part, or we can do it, or whatever. And it's just like unbelievable. So I just a small group of astrologers that are pretty much looking at it the way that I am at this point, and I love those guys, and women, that are able to see it beyond the mind spell.
Well, it does take a special kind of person. It doesn't matter if you're an astrologer, a scientist, a doctor. It takes a special kind of person to not give into that whole brain, whatever we want to call it, brainwashing, whatever we want to call that's happening, it does take a special kind of person to do that. You on your podcast with Naraya, you focus on, I know it's astrology, but you do world events, things that are happening.
Mhm.
I spoke about Hawaii. There's you did have you have so every, I think you do it every week. Yeah, it's every week.
It's due to my travel schedule. It hasn't been so completely regular, but we do one for sure every other week. During the time period of the Lahaina attack, we did one a following week. So sometimes we do one more often, but
I
it's
think you did
generally twice a
two.
month.
I think you did two around
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
Yes, I watched those. Uh, do you? Okay, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to frame my question. Do you think, or is it, if you look at the charts, can you kind of see things that might happen, or do you see what's happening and then look at the charts to interpret what may be happening?
Well, I'll give you an example. In 2017, our school put together a summit that was called Preparing for 2020. Now, no one among the team of people that we had on that summit said, "Oh, there's going to be COVID," but we knew based upon the cycles, and there was a really incredibly rare and potent alignment in 2020, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto conjunct. And it was pretty obvious something huge was going to happen. And so basically, the whole summit was preparing for that, preparing for every eventuality. We, at the end of this year, we're putting together something called Preparing for 2025. Okay.
Is that something that people can attend to, or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. It's actually we're not calling it. I'm sort of getting tired of the word summit. It kind of reminds me of when war leaders get together and have a summit. So we're calling it the Preparing for 2025 Council, and we're
Okay.
doing it over 4 days, and I'm with different speakers, some in our school, some not, that are awake to what's happening and looking at what are the events of 2024, including the eclipses, because actually from 2012 through next year, 4 different eclipse paths, total eclipse paths across the United States, continental U.S.
Wow.
So the U.S. is right in the crosswires, including the U.S. Pluto return and Chiron return, and those are all things that I'd like to cover on the podcast. But there's the world events are moving so fast that the one we did a few days ago was on one of my main interests these days, which is transhumanism, AI. It's called technosis, the development of the doppelganger, the harvesting of data, and those kinds of things. It's all covered under the banner astrologically of what's called the shadow of Aquarius. So there's a way of looking at the whole thing based upon the different signs of the zodiac, the different mystery schools of life. It's the shadow side of Aquarius. So we talk about those kind of things, but then based on the late developments, I said, wow, I'm going to have to start talk about the chart of Israel, and so as we go through each show, we're looking at those kind of things also. Like I did a whole show looking at the charts of the billionaires that the Hawaiian Islands have been allocated to. So
Yeah.
we looked at the charts of Bezos and
Bill Gates, I
and
think.
and, and Gates and Oprah and Pierre, whatever, however you pronounce his last name is, who was allocated Oahu. What's his Larry Ellison, who basically owns Lanai. All these characters, and plus the Silicon Valley billionaires, the ones that basically openly talked about how they want to eliminate carbon-based life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't really want to get into the world events, what's going on right now. But when you say, okay, we're going to look at the charts of Israel, and I
Right.
imagine the charts of Gaza, the charts of Palestine, these different
Like
charts.
that.
Yes, right. So it's based on yeah, that's an interesting, I'm going to watch that one. I want to see. I don't want to get into the
Well, I
company.
had a whole Jeannie, I had a whole show planned that we haven't gotten to yet because of world events, which is looking at the charts of the World Economic Forum, the EU, and NATO. And looking at those charts is incredibly instructive because
And when
every
you
one
do,
of those organizations.
when you look at these
Okay.
organizations, how do you look at organization, a chart for an organization versus I could sit there and say, hey, Daniel, my information is, this is my full name. I don't know if you need it. This is my date of birth, and this is the time I was born. How do you do that with organizations?
Well, there is a standard way of determining the birth time of an organization, but quite
Ah,
frankly, how I mainly look at it is based upon the cycles that they're in. If, like,
oh,
the organization is in a Saturn return, if the organization is in a Saturn opposition, if they're in a nodal return, if there's a Pluto cycle happening to the organization. I mean, I looked at the chart of the Ukraine and Zelensky, and you can. It's the things are very evident when you look at those charts.
yeah, well, that's very interesting. So let's say moving from that, but staying in that realm. If I said, "Hey, Daniel, I want to get a reading with you," which I know you do readings for people, and they can also find that on your website to book with you, right? They could find that to book
Yeah.
with you reading. Okay, perfect. If I said, "Hey, this is my information. Also, this is the name of my company. Could you also read the chart for my company?" That's another tool that people can
Yeah,
use.
yeah, sure, absolutely. I do that. I also, I don't know if you know this, but on virtually every podcast we've done on your channel, I've said at the end, if there's any one of the primary movers of Unite that wants to do a session with me, we can do it directly on the channel.
I haven't seen that, but I'm here for it. Here for
I mean, I've offered to do it for Sergi, I mean, but obviously I would talk to him ahead of time to
right,
make sure that I'm not going to talk about things that he might not want to be talked about, right? But,
right,
in other words, it would be fun to share this particular paradigm with us. That'd be complimentary for my end to do it from someone and from your team that would like to have this approach demonstrated on.
huh? Well, I want to connect with him too, and we'll see. We'll see if we can make that happen. Well, that's really cool. And I didn't even. I guess there's some people. You if you don't take a deep dive, and that's with anything, right? If I want to learn more about neuroscience or about this, you have to kind of deep dive. I can, I on my spare time like to study herbalism and just kind of things like that. But if I don't pick up a book and I don't really read it, what I'm going to read online or what people are sharing isn't always what the thing really is. So I didn't even know that. I mean, now thinking about it, I feel a little bit ignorant, but I didn't really know that as far as an organization, you could do that and use that as a tool as well. So that's
Yes.
pretty cool for people to know, um, to do that.
I always advocate people reading books, but then again, we have I'm not so much into the modern style of sound bites. So I mean, I do long podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm capable of doing one that's relatively short, but I mean, I have stuff you can find up there that lasts a couple hours, and then you don't have to read the books because I try to cover as much as possible.
So you are saying, and I just want to ask this question about the astrology portion. If people are just looking up their sun signs, why don't you even, and I know it's a type of schooling, but if somebody's watching this and they say, well, why not my sun sign? Why not the one that I look up and I'm like, based on the day that I was born, I'm an Aquarius. Why not? Why not that?
Well, because then you're basically saying that everyone born within a certain date range is going to have the same characteristics, and that's just simply not true. Um, it just based on experience, it's not. I mean, I've noticed, for example, that if I'm talking to a woman who says, "I am absolutely scorpionic," I'm a Scorpion. Well, almost in every case, that woman is going to have the Sun and Venus both in Scorpio.
Mm,
So basically, it's the Venus position is the leading edge for how that person is actually trying to learn how to be.
Right.
Like you, for example, your sun sign is different than your Venus position.
Right. Right.
If I'm talking to you, doing a reading for you, I'm emphasizing not your sun sign unless there's in a cycle. There could be a cycle to it, but the Venus in Sagittarius position is the thing I would be focusing on, as well as if I knew what your rising sign was, because that's giving the instructions. If I could say it in a very generalized way, when you know the ascendant, and when you know, for a woman now, if you know your Venus position, then all life questions can at least be generally answered by applying the questions to that part of the chart. And it's not necessarily the path of least resistance. It's like the set of instructions can actually be challenging for a person. But our view is that if a person is in alignment with their purpose, if they're in alignment with the cycle they're actually in, the universe is supportive of that. There'll be a sense that I'm on the right track when you do that. And a lot of people don't even know the set of possibilities. I mean, back in the early 70s, part of our revolutionary approach was that we were trying to break people out of this view that all men are supposed to be a certain way and all women are supposed to be a certain way. So we're kind of like developing a larger template, of a full spectrum of possibilities. Venus in Sag is not a mother archetype; it's an explorer philosopher archetype.
Yeah. When because I guess when you're a little bit more into it, it's like, okay, this is my sun sign, but this is my moon and rising sign. And when you look at like the characteristics of that, I just, it's just it,
Well, I'll give you another example. As when I was researching all this, it turned out that it was in the 1800s that two very clever journalists came up with the idea of selling a newspaper column by putting people into easily discernible categories. Because at that time period, it was very hard to ever find anybody who had the books, that knew the rest of the story.
right.
So they were able to have a successful newspaper column by putting people into 12 categories. But even if you go back to ancient astrology, like the Hellenistic time or 2,000, 2,500 years ago, the emphasis was not sun signs. The emphasis was on the ascendant.
Mm.
And the moon was even more important, I mean, than the sun sign. So the sun sign thing has made it quite superficial. And it's enabled people to make a lot of money on sun sign columns, but it's not that useful for the evolution of the soul.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Daniel, tell us if somebody on your website, could they book with you and other people? And if somebody wanted to book with you, just kind of what does that look like? How much, is it a certain amount of time? Is it like a 30-minute reading? How does that, what should somebody expect?
Well, on our website, there's a section called certified astrologers, and some are mentors, some are teachers, but there's a whole roster of ones that have their bios and pictures up there, and each of them has their own individual um, pricing and so on. So it's not standardized. Although when people take our courses for certification, we do have a standardized rate for mentoring, but each individual has the freedom to set their own prices. I mean, I have a certain price, and but it's not. Uh, we've been for ever since 2007. We've been a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 organization, although we are shifting at this point to a more of a PMA approach. But I don't. We've kind of made the decision we don't any longer want to be in any way connected to the United States of America, the corporation. And there's certain kind of things that even in a 501c3 that prevent you from doing certain things. So we're kind of shifting our approach currently. But we have been a nonprofit school, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. When the stream ends, you stay in the studio. I forgot to tell you that at the beginning. But thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing time with us. If anybody is interested in more and wants to either learn more about turningoftheages.com. You could, look for Daniel and all the information that he has on turningoftheages.com. If you are interested in the TOTAMS Astrologer Certification Program, you can also go to turningoftheages.com and find that there. There is a section there that says, how did you find us? Mention Unite, just so they know that you saw this and found us there.
Yes.
What were you going to say?
I was just saying that also, if you go to the website, I forgot to mention this, we send out a free newsletter twice a month, at the new moon and the full moon. And the free news, all you have to do is put your email in there, and you'll be on our newsletter list. So that's just another resource we have. I forgot to mention about that.
Oh,
And if I could I put a plug for what our next show is?
of course, yes,
yes.
yes.
So it's going to be, I think, on the 19th of October is when it happens, and we'll be having a special guest for that show. It's probably this guy that he's a Substack writer. He's actually become a personal friend who probably knows more about the Maui situation and is an expert on directed energy weapons. And Kyle Young, who will be on the show with us on the 19th.
Nice. And what day is that?
The 19th of October. Yes.
Okay. If you have the link up, we'll include the link in the description as well, so people can save that as well.
We haven't posted it yet. It'll be posted shortly. I appreciate the way that you all advertise the different things, and I'm very happy to be on your platform. And
thank you for being
wishing you the greatest success, and you're doing very important work, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for being on Creators Corner on Unite. Bye.
Till next time. All right. Bye, Jeannie.